CityWorks Expo is a collaborative, co-creative, and multidisciplinary idea exchange and festival conference that happens each fall in Roanoke, Virginia. By day, attendees are immersed in thought-provoking presentations, riveting performances, and engaging dialogue. By night, the conference continues with after-hours networking opportunities during street festivals, parties, and musical events. To learn more about Expo, visit cityworksexpo.com. Expo 2014 was made possible by these fine sponsors.
Mary Bishop is the secret to my success. I'm a psychiatrist, so you can imagine as a psychiatrist what you learn about cities. That would be zero. So I was studying the AIDS epidemic, and I came to realize that AIDS was located in certain neighborhoods that had been trashed. And I wanted to understand why trashed neighborhoods led to AIDS risk behaviors. So I was sort of wandering around asking this when I came across a newspaper article called Street by Street, Block by Block, which was the most detailed investigation of urban renewal in Roanoke, Virginia. And so I called up the author, Mary Bishop, and I said, I just need to know more, and I think I need to come to Roanoke. And she said, of course you do. Come stay at my house. And so not only did she welcome me into her home, but she introduced me to all of her friends. And I met some amazing people who have had the biggest impact on my life. Mr. Chubb, Reggie Sharif will be here for the tour. The Evelyn and Helen sisters, who were just amazing in their fight for Roanoke. Walter Clater, people who shared with me what had happened in their neighborhood and how it had devastated them. But really, it was Mary's work that put all of this at my feet. And I think it's a rare gift to encounter a journalist of her stature who was just so open and connected me to so many people. So instantly, I had from her work, this story of what it does to a neighborhood and to a city to do what we did in urban renewal. So this is Mary on the bridge connecting from downtown over to Gainsborough. And I think this is just quite an emblematic moment of what I think the problem is in the American city that is really, for all of us, the most difficult problem to address, which is the physical and social and economic fracture that has grown between disadvantaged communities, which includes very many African American communities, and the trajectory of what's happening in America. So this bridge, which used to be a street, which led directly from downtown into the African American community, is now only a walking bridge. And I think that's highly emblematic, that you can still get there, but it's a little harder, and it's not meant for those of us who are African American to be included in the next thing that's happening. And that's problematic for African Americans, but it's also disastrous for the whole society. So from Mary and having the opportunity to be here in Roanoke, I've learned a series of lessons that I, as a social psychiatrist, think are essential for our future. And I think it gets more urgent every year that we learn these lessons, because as a nation, we have to deal with increasingly difficult problems, like what's going to happen to the weather. I live in New Jersey, where we've been hit by multiple storms, so these issues it's just really terrifying to us. But the first lesson was really the lesson of Rootshock. This is a photograph that I find just so informative and important. The Kimbell Neighborhood worried as urban renewal nears. You can see on the faces of the people this deep understanding that their beloved neighborhood is about to be seized by the city, that their special homes that they've worked so hard to have are going to be bulldozed, that their churches are going to be destroyed, that their networks of kinship and friendship are going to be dispersed. This is all hovering over their heads. And however bad they thought it would be, the reality was that much worse, because the reality of living with the loss of something as large as a well-functioning neighborhood, a neighborhood of love and friendship and sharing, that loss is almost impossible to put into words. And that's why I thought the gardener's term, root shock, the tearing a plant out and destroying the roots, was really the only way to begin to convey what people described and what they then had to endure for the rest of their lives. A neighborhood is a different kind of a loved one from a mother or a father. But a neighborhood is a mother and a father and a neighbor and a friend and a church and a school. It's all those things. And to lose the place of those things creates a deep grief in our hearts that we cannot escape, we cannot assuage. This is the map that Mary created, and all of these little shadow boxes are all the homes. And what's even more horrific is that what they did was to put in a post office, a civic center, and a Coca-Cola bottling plant. In urban renewal around the nation, we destroyed neighborhoods in 993 cities through 2,532 urban renewal projects. And we used the land very wastefully. It was supposed to be a higher use, but how is a civic center a higher use than a neighborhood of love and kinship? Mary's gift to us in seeking out people and in working with them until there were the bonds of trust, that the Black community could tell a white reporter what they had lived through, has opened up really the floodgates to integrating this story of urban renewal into our histories. Urban renewal, as it exists in planning books or urban histories, is a story about cities. It didn't exist in African American history at all. And as it exists in planning, it wasn't really a story about African Americans because nobody had gone to ask them what it was like. And so Mary opened up a story that people in Asheville have been glad to tell. These are school children learning about urban renewal in Madison, Wisconsin. And this is going on a tour with in Syracuse, New York. There are so many cities that I have been to where people have gone into this history and begun to say, and then in the 1950s, we did urban renewal, and that's when we put the highway in, as a point of departure from a past that they loved, and as a point for saying, and this must be mended. So Mary helped all of us put this on the agenda of the American city. And it is a story because 67% of the people who were displaced across the nation were African American. It is very much a story of segregation and of all the ways in which racism gets acted out in space. The second thing I learned in Roanoke was from Mary's second big series, The Invisible Inner City, and that had to do with what I've come to call serial forced displacement, which is even in some ways more difficult and more painful. So Mary pointed out that these areas, can you see that little dot? Very little. These areas in the middle, the green, are what was cleared for urban renewal. In Gainsborough, which we'll be visiting this afternoon, it was declared an urban renewal zone, but never cleared. But declaring an urban renewal zone is like super duper redlining, so no investment can go in, and the place fell apart. So it was actually a site of accelerated disinvestment because of the label. But Mary, in her second paper, The Invisible Inner City, pointed out that this much larger area around the urban renewal area, so all the purple, so the dotted lines are the urban renewal area, but the purple is the way in which this process that geographers call contagious housing destruction echoes out from a space of destruction into the surrounding areas. And so if you drive out from Gainsborough, you'll see it. It's very evident. The West End that we drove through this morning on our way here is an example of this process of disinvestment eating slowly across the landscape and pushing the people out. This is not urban renewal coming in with bulldozers. This is simply denying money. In 2000, the census pointed out that African Americans had been pushed to the north and to the west of Roanoke as a result, and this is because of these two processes. So in schematic, we see the green of urban renewal, the purple of the disinvestment in the inner city, and then the pushing of African Americans to the north and west of Roanoke. This is a process that you can find in every American city that I've examined, that repeated policies, we can add to this story many other policies, but repeated policies that undermine the stability of neighborhoods have led to not one, but multiple displacements of people. In fact, we could say that in the American city, when we notice a problem, the answer is, we'd better move the black people. Now that may sound weird to you, but lately they've said, oh, black people are living in housing projects with a lot of other poor people. And that's the problem with the American city. We have concentrated poverty. And so we'd better create mixed income communities for the poor black people because otherwise they won't succeed. So we'd better move them. Urban renewal is the same thing. The African American ghetto neighborhoods were a cancer. So we'd better move the black people. And at the end of moving the black people are supposed to be better off, but that is not, in fact, what happens. What in fact happens, in my research, is a gradual tearing apart of community. Alexandra Layton, who is one of the founders of my discipline, social psychiatry, said that you could imagine communities really working together, doing all the things communities are supposed to do, and on one end, call that the model community. But if it falls apart and people stop thinking I'm supposed to care for my neighbor, I'm just supposed to care for me, then everybody starts thinking, well, I just have to take care of me, and then that becomes a collection of individuals as opposed to the model. So that's at the other end. In looking at the stories of many cities, but in particular looking at the story of Harlem, African American neighborhood in New York City, what we noticed was that Harlem didn't go from being a model to being a collection in one swoop. It didn't fall apart at once. What happened was that each of these policies, and there we looked at urban renewal, deindustrialization, planned shrinkage, and now gentrification, pushed the community, dispersed people, but tore the bonds, created incoherence, created new ways of living together that moved it from being a model where everybody was in it together towards being a collection where people would say, no, I just have to look out for me. The teenagers were in many ways the most articulate about this because the teenagers would literally say, nobody cares about me. I have to stand on my own two, meaning I'm just standing on my own 2 feet. Nobody cares about me. It is not possible to do this to a society without injuring the society. It is, the invisible inner city was such an important title to me because, and in fact, I use the term in my book, Urban Alchemy, to talk about invisibilization, that it's actually a tactic. Make the black people invisible so nobody even knows they're there. Who cares if they're suffering? If they're way at the outskirts of town and nobody has to go by and nobody has to know. This invisibilization creates an illusion, a disastrous illusion, that what happens to black people only matters to black people and it's not going to bother the white people. And that flies in the face of reality. Reality being that we're all in this together. At some level, being a nation is going to involve all of us. And we are facing challenges at a scale we have not ever seen before. We have never seen what's happened to the regularities of the weather. Never seen that before in human history. We're in an uncharted territory. And if we're going to go in uncharted territory at war with each other, the odds that we will do well go way down. So how do we mend the fracture? How do we become the resilient society we'd like to think we are? I encountered a Frenchman whose name is Michel Cantal-Dupart, who said to me, you know, you're focused on neighborhoods, but if you want to solve the problems of neighborhoods, you actually have to work on the whole city. I was pretty shocked because I didn't know anything about cities, but he offered to teach me, and he invited me to come to his house in the south of France. And I don't know how many of you might have that sort of French country furniture, but the thing about French country furniture is that it really fits in a French country house. The ceilings are very tall. And if you ever just, want to see French country furniture, you should. Cantal's house is just full of it. It's just an amazing place. And this house is in a very small village which had grown in prosperity during the Civil War because the northern states had blockaded the South, and the pine products, which were needed for ships that the British needed for their navy, couldn't be purchased from the South, the pines in Georgia, for example. And therefore, the British went to the south of France, along the Atlantic, where there are pine forests, and got their pine products there. So this area became incredibly wealthy. And among other houses that got built in this village was Cantal's house, which was the local pharmacy. It had fallen on hard times because after World War II, people left the villages of France, and many of them are terribly depopulated. In thinking about what to do in the little village where his house was, he decided, I will put up signs, I will tell the story of all the buildings. So this is the story of the street that his house is on, which is the Rue d'Église, the street of the church. I've had the opportunity of visiting cities all over France with him over the past 20 years, and out of that, I have abstracted what I call 9 elements of urban restoration, which are sort of in 3 parts. Aligning, getting on the same page with each other, creating the new, whatever it is we need, and then connecting. And it's through this process that I think we mend the fracture. But I want to focus today on just this biggest problem of the city in mind, because in the way in which living apart, living in Jim Crow, has shaped our understanding of the world, it is possible to think that it's all about your community, whether it's a white community or a black community or a Hispanic community, Asian community, it's all about your community, and not even to really know what to do with the other communities. So the city in mind is, I think, conceptually the biggest cognitive challenge that we face in America. So it's the first element of urban restoration, and the advice is keep the whole city in mind. So what is it we have to keep in mind, and how do we know about this? This is a redlining map. How many of you have seen a redlining map or had a chance to study it? So I think that's about 5 hands. So, which is, when we think that when we live in these little communities that are set off from each other, it's partly because some crucial documents are hidden in the National Archives, and if you want to see them, you got to go to the National Archives. There are 200 redlining maps, and they have not yet all been scanned and put on the internet. Now, how trivial is that? These are crucial documents for the fate of the American city. How trivial is it for 200 maps to be scanned and put on the internet? Is this a day's work? Why has this not happened? I hear some knowing laughs. So redlining maps is what in medicine we like to call a 2x2 table. So it's, are you white? Are you non-white? So think of that on the side, and then across the top, are the buildings old or are the buildings new? And then that forms 4 compartments, and those 4 compartments end up being green, blue, yellow, red. So green are places that have white people and new buildings. Blue are places that have not as rich white people and slightly older buildings. Yellow is people who are sort of edging on the white scale. So at that time in 1937, those would be foreigners or whatever, like Italians. Italians were sort of white. They were. Now they're fully white. Do I lie? You got to go see. They have surveys. They wrote it down. Oh, Italians live there bad. I mean, I'm not making this up. And then the red was for black people in old buildings. So these maps were made in 1937 to guide the investment of banks. So you didn't want to invest in places where there were old buildings and black people. So literally, the banking system, it wasn't like a don't ever lend, but the ability to get money, to get loans, went way down. And what did we just hear in that wonderful talk about slow money? People need money. They need a new mixer so their business can work, or they need to fix up a shed where they can have a market. Money is essential. It moves capitalism. So if you have cut off the money, you have done remarkable things to the community. So this is my hometown of Orange, New Jersey. I augmented the black line so you can see exactly where I lived, what's going on here. And this is in 1939, June 1st, 1939, that they made this map. So you can see that we had, just guess. We had some black people, we had some Italian people, and we had some white people. These were fully white people. Partly white people, and these were black people. If I put you down in Orange, New Jersey today, and I told you, look around you, and tell me, in 1939, how was this rated? Was this rated red, green, or yellow? You would be able to say, with nearly 100% accuracy, having never been there before, how it was rated in 1939. These maps were incredibly powerful. But the maps were made on top of the segregation. So that's me. You might not have recognized me. On my first day of school. And so I lived right here. But you notice this black line. So, because I lived here, I went to Oakwood Avenue School according to this map. This was the school districting map, which was gerrymandered because this was a little extension of the black community. And we weren't allowed to go to the white school. The white school, which was Haywood Avenue School. We had to go to Oakwood Avenue School. So, you can't see the dot? No, I can't see it either. It's a hell of a dot. There it is. I would walk over and point, but it's kind of high. Can you see where it says Alcott Street? Alcott Street, whatever. The point is, the line jags. It's not supposed to jag. It's supposed to go straight. That's gerrymandering. So because this was after Brown versus Board of Education, we were able to straighten out the lines. This is de jure segregation, and we were able to end that in the schools. This effort was led by my parents, Ernie and Maggie Thompson, and the black community had, up to that point, had no political representation. And so they became very excited, having defeated school segregation, maybe they could go on and have political representation as well. So they put together this New Day platform. At that time, everybody had to run citywide. And so there was no opportunity there was no way the little black community, which you remember is that little red section, that was the black community, there was no way that little neighborhood was going to be able to get somebody elected citywide because white people would not vote for a black person in 1958. But in spite of that, they ran a citywide program. They put together a citywide platform and they ran a citywide campaign. And they called it the New Day for Orange, and they got Orange on the move. What's important about this is that when you're thinking citywide, you have to think about all the issues and all the systems. At this CityWorks Expo, we have heard about all the systems, the financing system and the broadband system. And think about the water system and the housing system and the transportation system. All of that is here in this 1958 platform about how do you think citywide. And then they began to engage in the citywide efforts. This photo on this side is Dr. John Alexander fighting for a new high school in 1968, and that's Ben Jones, the first African-American councilman, fighting for peace in 1970. The Italian community, which was, you remember those yellow people, was very strong and very wonderful community, and so that's like the density of the center of Orange, and it got taken out by a highway. So this is where we get into, here's a city and people are fighting for political representation, and trying to imagine a whole better city and fighting for it and making a little progress. But the highway comes through. We suffer from deindustrialization, as Roanoke did, as all cities in America have. This is the Orange Memorial Hospital, which was the last major employer in the hospital, which closed in 2004. A beloved hospital, place of many, everybody has memories, very positive memories, and yet all the people who work there are now, just gone. And disinvestment, the burning down and the loss of housing. And the destruction as people come in and carelessly want to put in a bank or something of our historic treasures. Our Main Street has one of the longest stretches of historic buildings in New Jersey. It's a wonderful Main Street, but people are very careless of our patrimony. In a city then that's going through hard times like this, it's easy to see the vacant lots and the closed up factories and it's now a majority black city, and it's easy to say that's a nothing place. So from not seeing the whole city at all to seeing a whole city that's a nothing, that's written off, it's been essential to really say, no wait, this is actually a place of history and culture. This is a photograph of a funeral, and the family of the deceased hired these beautiful black horses to pull a glass carriage so that the journey of this woman's casket to her final resting place would be in this highly ceremonious thing. But it created this wonderful event for everybody who happened to be on the street and who was watching these horses as they went by. And, cities are full of jokes. You see Mount Vesuvius, can you see Mount Vesuvius is erupting in the background of this mural? And the cow is trying like crazy to get out of this corral. I'm glad you can see the cow. Look, it's really all about the cow. There's a story called The Tragedy of the Commons, which is that there's a commons, and everybody has a cow on the commons. And then somebody gets the bright idea, wait, I could have 2 cows on the commons. And then everybody wants 2 cows on the commons. And then the cows eat all the grass, there's no more grass, and all the cows die. And this is really a story about, it's not just about cows, it's about, can we understand that greed is antithetical to survival? And the author of this was like, I don't think so. I don't think people can understand that. But I think the person who put that cow in the road had a better hope for us. We will get out of the way of Mount Vesuvius. So the thing is that Orange, New Jersey, this majority black city that's fallen apart, now it's full of immigrants, wonderful people, good sense of humor, lovely sense of spectacle, is in a bullseye for development. And what does that mean in the New York City region? It means that they're going to put up market rate housing that nobody will be able to afford, and all the poor people that are there will get elbowed out. And how do we know this? We know this because these are the train stations, and New Jersey is pushing transit-oriented development around the train stations. So it's a crowded region, and housing is at a premium. So pushing out the black people, the next ring of serial forced displacement is hovering over us. How do we begin to deal with that? How do we take this lesson of Roanoke, that serial forced displacement is a real thing? How do we say we're not going to displace the poor, we're not going to push the black people out, we're going to make a city together? How do we get onto that page? That, I think, as we get the city in mind, that becomes the reality that we have to face, that we set up Jim Crow, we set up invisibilization, and then we can easily push people aside because we don't meet them, we don't know them, we don't listen to their jokes, we don't love them, we don't appreciate their festivals. So it's easy to just say, go away, you're in our way, and don't live with too many other poor people. We have created instead, the University of Orange. So trust me, a majority black, poor city full of immigrants is not automatically associated in our region with the concept of university. So University of Orange either makes people laugh or they look puzzled. Orange has a university, and we say yes. Our university is a free people's university. We grant 3 degrees: the Bachelor of Freedom, which is known as the B Free, the Master of Freedom, known as the M Free, and the Doctor of Freedom, known as the Freed. If you would like to have a Bachelor of Freedom from the University of Orange, you can. We are happy to grant degrees to people all over the world. It requires that you take 2 courses, vote, go to a city meeting, have fun with your neighbors, and volunteer. We think that we don't know what to do. We've come to think of it as, okay, we're in post-industrial confusion. We used to be an industrial city, now we're not. We don't want to become a suburb for well-to-do people who want to commute to New York City. We want to be this funny place where people tell strange jokes and have festivals in the street. We want to be what we are. But how do we do that? We're going to need some money, we're going to need some jobs, we need some ideas. We don't know. We're like, well, this is kind of like the slow money thing. We have each other. Let's talk to each other. We'll invent things. And we think there are 2 great sources of invention in the history of America. One is the freedom schools of the civil rights movement, where people just got together and said, well, how are we going to win the right to vote? How are we going to pass that test? And the second is Thomas Edison's factory of invention. Thomas Edison made a factory not to make things, but to make patents, to make inventions. And the coolest thing in the factory of invention is the couch where he used to take naps. So I want to have a factory of invention so I can go to work and take a nap on the couch. So we want to make a mashup of the Freedom School and the Factory of Invention and invent our way out of this dilemma. We want to find a new path. And we want to find it, all of us together. We don't want anybody pushed out of our city. There's room for some new people, but we don't want it to be just pushing the poor aside, pushing out. We don't want no more of that. We can't do that anymore. We have to learn how to work together if we're going to solve the problems that are coming down on us. I'd like to close with returning to this photo of Mary on the bridge. That these are lessons that I learned here at the feet of amazing citizens of Roanoke, who, by sharing what life was like in their neighborhoods, gave me a deep sense of what a great urban neighborhood is like and of what a great American city is meant to be. Because of Jim Crow, because of racism, we have some terrible, lingering legacy problems. That we have been a great American city, separate but equal, which is a lie. You can't be separate but equal. But in that legacy, we have these stories of how people lived together, what they shared with each other, how they took care of each other, how they loved each other, how they worshiped together, how they educated their children, how they gave them values, how they gave them pride. How do you give people pride in the face of second-class citizenship? That's in their stories. How do you give them hope in the face of enduring oppression? That's in these stories. These stories of Roanoke teach us how to be good people. And we all need these stories because we have to solve this lingering problem of American Jim Crow so that we can take care of the weather. There you have it. Thank you.